Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how you doing?
Doing all right. We're, I guess, on the clock now to get finished after we spent so much time talking about, basketball, Andy Samberg.
Pop Star, Never Stop, Never Stopping, Hot Rod, Palm Springs. You know, very
Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Underrated comedian of our time, I will say, Andy Samberg. I do love Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's a great watch. But
yes.
Anyway, yes, we were doing a lot of procrastinating before we started talking about all kinds of random nonsense. But today we are here to talk to you about some more focused random.
A suckling rat to a suckling pig.
Exactly, yes. Tatsu appreciates that, our dog. But anyway, we are here today. We're starting, we already talked about it a little bit a few weeks ago, but we're starting to really gear up for the draft, as I'm sure you've seen Green Bay is. They actually just released, I don't know if you saw this, Dad, but they released a mock-up of what they're going to do with the space as the draft comes to Green Bay for the first time, which is going to be very exciting. But we are here today to talk about a few of our initial draft crushes before the Combine in a few weeks. The Combine starts on the 27th. And goes through the 2nd, I believe it is. So keep your eyes out for that. We'll be doing a lot of talk about that because as we talked about many times before, Dad, few teams care as much about athletic thresholds as the Packers do. So that is definitely something where you really want to keep an eye on it. Just like we talked about, few teams care about the Senior Bowl as much as the Packers do. So the Senior Bowl and the Combine are very important for all teams, but especially important for the Packers. But leading up to the Combine, like we mentioned, we're just talking about a few of the prospects that we have our eyes on for the Packers, that we have, of the ones we've watched so far, of the ones we've watched at the Senior Bowl, watched their tape of so far this year, looked at the numbers, looked at the spreadsheets, looked at their pressure rates allowed, pressure rates, yards per coverage snap allowed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, physical profiles, what athletic testing we can get from the Senior Bowl data that you have so kindly created a spreadsheet for me to peruse. But we're just talking about, a few of our draft crushes for the first round for the Packers, some potential guys to keep an eye out for, and then some for the second round. So I think I have 3 for the first round, you have 3 for the first round, and you might have snuck in an extra one for the second round. So I'll have 3 of each there as well. But
I didn't realize I'd gone over the limit.
Yeah, I know.
You're lucky because I actually, not only did I have 3 for the second round, but I also had 3 players that I thought about doing that are sitting there at the end that I changed my mind on. I could have thrown them in too.
I saw them and I'm like, I hope he doesn't just throw those in as well. But anyway, normally we'd be touching on some, more Packers news as well here, but it seems like the only real news is that John Eric Sullivan, who's the one of the VPs in the front office for the Packers, is getting interviews for the GM job for the Jaguars. So it's possible the Packers could be losing one of their, main guys in the front office. Is he's essentially the right-hand man of Brian Gutekunst. So that would definitely be a huge loss. But he is interviewing. He just completed his interview yesterday, I believe. So keep an eye out for that. Other than that, really not a whole lot going on in Packers coaching circles, Packers front office circles. We talked about already, they hired some assistant coaches just the previous week. So if you want to go check out that episode, go check that out. But yeah, not a whole lot to talk about news-wise. One other thing we do want to touch on, though, before we get to anything is, if you like what you hear, subscribe. We really appreciate it, whether that's, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all 3. We would really appreciate it. Tell a friend, leave a comment, leave a review. Follow us on Blue Sky at Father Son Packer. We skeet out whenever we have new episodes out, content from other Packers content creators, news, roster moves, coaching hires, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So go ahead and check all that out. The only other report that was recently news related, Dad, that maybe we should touch on is that Rob Domofsky reported that there had been some internal frustration surrounding Jair Alexander's availability in the past years. This kind of just all seems like a prelude to him eventually being moved on from, right? This is just kind of the first steps to that, where, the team starts to put out some, reports about, there'd been some frustrations and there'd been some problems and da-da-da-da-da, and it's just kind of all leading up to eventually moving on from him this offseason, right? That kind of feels like it.
That's what it felt like, especially when it came out. I mean, the other news that just came out league-wide is the salary cap going up more than people expect, which I think is mostly going to help the teams that had no salary cap to work with at all. Going to have to cut a bunch of players.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just raising the salaries for everybody. And the effective space probably won't change much, except people who are going to have to, teams who are going to have to cut players might not have to. That's my take on it anyway. That it won't allow the Packers to sign extra players because everybody's going to be able to sign extra players.
It's probably just going to be also maybe a slightly smaller pool of free agents as teams are able to keep, players around that maybe would have gone to free agency otherwise. I don't think it's
players I'm testing the waters, baby.
That's, I mean, also possible. But yeah, so, and it went up, but I think it was Ken Ingalls was posting out about like essentially the Packers in many ways, with the way that they have their cap structured for a lot of these contracts, had sort of planned for the cap to go up this much. I think it was like between McKinney and Jacobs, I believe it was, just between the two of them, like their cap hits went up the like a half as much as the cap went up. So like it's just the way that they had the contract structured. It doesn't really end up mattering that much for the Packers that the cap went up that much. They're still going to have a lot of cap room. We talked about it in the previous episode. If you want to go check that out, we talked about it in our favorite free agent targets for the Packers. Several of those hopefully will still be available, but I guess we will see. But Dad, I guess since we don't have much else to talk about news-wise, let's just get into it. And let's start with
though we managed to ramble on for 5 minutes without any news.
There was some information there. But anyway, let's start talking about some of our initial draft crushes, our initial favorite players. So let's start with some of the first rounders. I think this is kind of, I don't know about you, I looked at it through the lens of a mix of looking at need, players that I thought, looked well when I looked at their tape, players that are high in consensus big boards, players that are projected to go in the range where the Packers are picking, and also players where they kind of seem to be a good fit, like I mentioned also. Let's start with, though, first rounders. I think we each have 3 of them. Do you want to start with your first one? I don't know if you want to start with your favorite or the player that is highest on the big board. You can take it any way that you want.
I guess I'll start with my favorite. And I'm playing a little loose with whether players are going to be available. It depends at who's ranking.
It's still so early in the process
aspirational.
Exactly. But a lot of it's still so early in the process that, you just don't. And that's why these are very early draft crushes. A lot of these, after the combine, a lot of players will shoot up. A lot of players will shoot down.
This guy's going to the top 8 now. I don't think he's going to make it to 23.
Exactly. But hey, we got to get it on the ground floor while we can so we look really smart when they crush the combine.
Or this is going to be the last chance that we get to say we were interested in these players, so get it in now before it becomes a ridiculous pipe dream.
At the same time, though, it's not like we're not saying anyone like, obviously it would be cool if the Packers got Abdul Carter. It's not going to happen. He's going top 5.
Wait, I got to make a change.
Let me put Travis Hunter in there. Yeah, okay. But anyway, who's your first player that you're keeping an eye on, that you are really high on right now, that you would, is an early draft player that you're kind of keeping an eye on? Yeah,
so I was looking at players James Pierce.
Tennessee.
Edge rusher from Tennessee. Is that right?
Yep, Volunteers.
And I was watching his tape, and I really liked what I saw on tape, some of his pass rush wins. Right now, he's 21st on Brugler's. Is the Beast out yet, or just this
Beast is not out yet? Just his current top 100.
And 11th by PFF, 20th by Daniel Jeremiah, and 15th by the consensus board at Mock Draft Database. I think not Mock Draft Database. Now, what's a little odd, that something should be mentioned, even though he's 20th in Daniel Jeremiah's ranking, he's not in his going in the first round in his mock draft 2.0. And in 1.0, he went 31st to the Chiefs. So he's like, that's a little bit surprising that he's not in the mock draft, first round mock draft, though he's ranked 20th by Daniel Jeremiah. Now, they don't have any official measurements for him yet. He wasn't at the Senior Bowl, where we have some measurements, but he's unofficially 6'5" and 243. But from PFF, he had elite overall defensive grades the last 2 years, 87.1 and 90.4 the last 2 years. He also had elite pass rush grades both of those years, 89.4 and 91.9. And he's improved his run defense grade to an excellent 84.1 in 2024, after being just above average at 67.7 in 2023 and poor in 2022 at 50.1. So in addition to being an elite pass rusher, he's adding to his total package with the better run defense. Okay, he's 12th overall in pressures among edges in 2024 with 55, and first in the class among edges in pass rush production, so including 8 sacks. He's 4th in the nation in the class in pass rush win percentage, according to PFF, and 18th in win percentage against in true pass sets, and 10th in pass rush production, including 6 sacks in true pass sets. So I watched some highlights, but I really like the tape. It shows a lot of quick wins against blockers. So hopefully something that's transferable to the pros, because it's not just coverage sacks or he's not getting blocked. He's like beating his man very quickly and getting to the backfield.
He's someone I like as well for the Packers specifically, just because of how he's super bendy, and he's not really like any of the other pass rushers the Packers have. The Packers have a lot of like crush the pocket, big guys. They don't have what they need is like I'll go and like win around the edge quickly guy, and I think that Pierce is a guy that really fits that profile.
Yeah, and so watching him, he's really effective using speed rushes, has good bend around the edge. He's got some good hand fighting too, where he's like swiping the hands away to break free of the blocker. Good lateral quickness. You see sometimes he'll jump inside, make a little side cut, and leave the blocker. And also is able to get some push as well. I watched some tape from this year. He's also held up well when setting the edge on run plays, showing the ability to disengage from the blocker to make plays on the ball carrier in the backfield. So there's a lot to like about his tape and also the overall numbers.
Yeah, I like Pierce a lot. He's someone I'm very high on. Big range there. And the one thing that is interesting I will say, the one red flag is that despite being very high on Daniel Jeremiah's big board, he didn't have him in his first round mock. And something that Daniel Jeremiah always says, who's very plugged in, if you don't know who he is, he's like, works for NFL.com, has a lot of contacts in the league, knows a lot of people on a lot of different teams. And he didn't have him in his first round mock. And what he always says is he does his big board with his eyes. So having him high on the big board means he likes him as a player. But he does his mock draft with his ears, which is like what he's hearing from teams. And so there is some disconnect where he likes what he's seeing from the player, but teams don't seem to like him as much. And the question is why that is. And so that's just one thing to keep an eye out for him, because otherwise I feel like every time I watch him, I'm like this is exactly what Green Bay needs, is an edge rusher who can bend the edge, win quickly, because they don't really have that right now, and be just a pass rush specialist out there and kind of fill the void that they had at edge rusher last year where they just didn't have any production there.
Right. And a lot of the wins are kind of this slow burn, coverage sacks, just kind of mashing the pocket, not getting to the quarterback.
I mean, we all remember the Jalen Hurts just holding the ball for like 8 seconds on his first drop back in the playoffs.
It's like an 8-second padding. Yeah, there was. Yeah, where's the
there
pass
were
rush?
And there were more than one of those this season. Like that was a problem. That was a good stretch of the season.
The worst of the second half of the season that I remember.
Yeah, but it was a microcosm of the problems that faced the D-line the whole season, really. And this is kind of a teaser. A lot of my players are edge players. I just think it's such a massive need for Green Bay. And unfortunately sorry, go ahead.
No, I would not be upset if they pick a first round edge. He's kind of on the edge. A lot of mocks have him not available by the time
depends.
As the Packers pick, but
maybe
he will be.
Yeah, like PFF's mock draft simulator has him projected to go top 10. Daniel Jeremiah didn't even have him in his first round mock. There's still a lot of time left in the pre-draft process for guys to move up and down, so you never know. But yeah, I think edge rusher, to me, is like, it's a good edge rusher class, number one. So there should be players available at 23. And in my opinion, it's their number one need. And I know some people will say corner. I think they can get by with the corners they have, honestly. I think we saw last year they cannot get by with the pass rush that they have.
The corner is an interesting thing. You talk about the secondary as a whole and how a lot of their sacks are like late developing coverage sacks.
So the coverage can't be that bad.
So here's the thing I've been thinking about the last couple of weeks. Does having an excellent safety group
cover for the corners
and make you able to get by with what most people think are not good enough corners, but they're able to hold up most of the time.
The argument to me because I agree, if the pass rush was this bad this past year, we can all agree the pass rush was terrible, but as a pass defense they were still good, then the coverage must at least be above average. Like that, has to be like this. Otherwise, because you're not telling me that you had below average D-line play, below average linebacker play, or average linebacker play, we'll say, and you're telling me the coverage was also bad and yet the pass defense was good. Like, that doesn't add up. The argument for corner is you can have a more diverse set of coverage menus with more capable corners. Because last year, you didn't trust Keyshawn and Valentine to play a lot of man. And so you were kind of stuck doing a lot of zone. And so it kind of in some ways handicapped what you were able to on the back end. My counter to that is, though, you still held a Eagles offense that put up like 35 plus points on most of the teams they played against. You held them down pretty well. And that's a team with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And I get that, everyone has in their mind Carrington Valentine getting bullied down the field by Dallas Goedert. And yes, that's not great. But I just think that corner is being overblown as a need. Like on paper, yes, it's a need. Because like you look, it's like Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine is your starting outside corners next year. And yes, they need depth behind that. That is 100% true. But the defense was not the problem at the end of the year, at least. And like the pass rush was, but if the pass rush was terrible and the defense was fine, then the coverage can't have been that bad, is I guess my final takeaway there.
Right. Whatever they're doing, either the safety play is able to cover up and make the corners better, or Hafley really knows what he's doing coaching secondary.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think most people would say like they were better than the sum of their parts, which, on the back end, which is what you want.
Yeah. And they were worse than the sum of their parts on the D-line, so I don't know.
That's apparently what they thought when they fired Rebrovich.
Yeah, so hopefully Covington can fix that up, and Ogabase as well as the assistant there. But moving on to anything else you wanted to say on Pierce, because he definitely would be on my list as well if you hadn't snagged him as well.
Yeah, so why don't you go on with whoever you want to start with?
I'm also going with an edge, and like I mentioned, I'm going to have a lot of edge players, and this is probably my favorite player so far. I am interested to see how he tests and what he weighs in at officially, but my first player is edge Donovan Iziraku out of Boston College. In terms of physical profile, these are numbers from the Senior Bowl. He's just going to be 21 years old at the start of the season. He doesn't turn 22 until early September, so he's very young. He's 6'2.25", so only 17th percentile for height amongst edges, 248 pounds, which is just 11th percentile for weight. But what he makes up for in that is his length. He has 34.5-inch arms, which are 84th percentile for arm length. So despite being short, he has massively long arms. And then we won't have official athletic measurements like we mentioned for another week. But in terms of on the field, ZebraTech, they measure the speeds via GPS tracker chips at the Senior Bowl. In terms of on-field stuff, he was 38th of 86 edge rushers in on-field speed at the Senior Bowl, 36th of 86 in maximum acceleration, and then 60th in maximum deceleration. So he's a above average athlete in terms of max speed and acceleration in terms of other edge players who have been at the Senior Bowl. So physical profile is pretty good. In terms of his production, this is out of 85 edges for whom I could find stats on in this class. So basically looking at the edges who are on the consensus, mock draft or consensus big board, and who had numbers via PFF that I was able to find. Of those 85, he was 29th in pressure rate. He was 4th in sacks. He had 16 and a half sacks this past year, which is ludicrous in 12 games. 13th in pressure to sack rate, 13th in stop rate, and 11th in run defense grade. So he was, in the upper 20 percentile in pretty much every important metric, whether it's, his ability to generate pressures, his ability to generate sacks, defending the run as an edge rusher, despite, being a bit undersized there. And then some quotes from scouts. This is per Daniel Jeremiah, who has him 28th on his big board. Quote, Iziraku is a compact edge rusher with outstanding length, burst, and production. In the pass game, he has a very quick first step and gets on top of blockers in a hurry. He excels at prying open the outside shoulder and cornering toward the quarterback. He has a full array of moves to complement his speed rush. He has one with a club swim, inside counter, spin move, and Euro step. He's an outstanding finisher. Against the run, he needs to be more consistent using his length to stack blocks. He takes them on with his shoulder too often. He shows solid effort on the backside to chase plays. Overall, Iziraku has an ideal body type to rush the passer, and he has all the tricks in his bag to win against good players, end quote. And then Dane Brugler has him 30th on his big board. Quote, Iziraku is more dip and rip than force player as a pass rusher because of his natural feel for depth points and the different ways he uses jab steps and cross chops to soften the corner. He ranked top 3 in the FBS this season in both sacks and tackles for loss. He can be overwhelmed at times versus the run, but flashes the length to get into his opponent's pads, lock out, and stalemate the point of attack, especially on the move, end quote. So I do think, at times he doesn't play with a lot of power as a pass rusher, but also I don't really think that's what the Packers need at edge rusher right now. They need a guy who can soften the corner. They need a guy who can turn the corner and get around the outside of tackles and win with like some outside moves and really get, turn the corner and bend there. And I think with his length and, he is a pretty developed pass rusher as well. Like Daniel Jeremiah mentioned, he has a variety of like tools in his toolbox already. They need a guy who is just like kind of a ready-to-go pass rusher, and I think Ezraku's very close to that in terms of a guy who can, win outside right now at the NFL level. At times during the Senior Bowl, he struggled, trying to win with power. And I do think that that's not something that's not really a strength of his, but I don't think the Packers need that. And so he's like my guy who I'm right now very, very high on. Had the production in college, did well at the Senior Bowl, and I think, should test very well at the combine as well. But he's my number one guy right now.
Yeah, I was considering him as well. Somebody else to give until I saw he was already on your list when I was looking for another player to add. So I like him as we both, I think, have a theme here amongst the edge rushers we're looking at
pass
so
rushers.
Far.
And I'm okay with a guy who's maybe a worse run defender if he's like a high level pass rusher. Like I'm all right with that.
Yeah, though I think it seems like Ezraku can do a little bit of everything.
I don't think he's like an outstanding run defender, but he graded pretty well in run defense this year in Boston College. Again, ACC competition, not exactly SEC or Big Ten, but still graded pretty well there. And I think it's maybe not something that he's elite at in terms of just playing with power, but his length should at least profile to be okay at setting the edge. Despite, being a bit shorter, he still has massively long arms. And so, maybe being shorter is a bit of an advantage there where he can play with a little bit more lower leverage because, he still has the long arms. So it shouldn't be as big of a problem. But yeah, but speaking of, pass rush types, I think you have another pass rusher on deck, don't you?
Yeah, I might as well just do my next pass rusher here.
I mean, this is the number one need for Green Bay outside of like a wide receiver one, but I just don't see a wide receiver one really in this class. But anyway, continue. Who's our next pass rush? So who's going to be our savior? Who's going to save us?
I have another slightly undersized pass rusher, Mike Green out of Marshall. So he's 6'3" and an eighth. He was at the Senior Bowl, so he got some.
The Thundering Herd.
Well. Right.
It's
great.
Yes,
great
the Thundering Herd. Because that was the one I got confused with Tulane earlier. I was like, the Green Wave?
It's like, who's got a green logo?
Green logo, small school? Nope, not Tulane. Thundering Herd, Marshall.
So 42nd percentile in height, only 251 pounds, 18th percentile weight, and short arms. This is the thing. It's only 7th percentile of edge rushers with arm length, 32 and an eighth. However, he's rising up boards. So this might be, he might be out of range, like, end up in the top 10 range by the time it's all said and done and not be an option. But for now, you might stretch to say he's 12th by Brugler, 12th by PFF, 23rd by Daniel Jeremiah, and 20th by consensus. So you get the 23rd and 20th is like kind of a possibility. Led the nation in sacks in 2024 with 17 of them. So I guess just edged out Ezraku. He led all edge rushers in PFF defense grade at 92.4, 6th in pass rush grade at 91.4, and had a 90.9 grade in pass rushing in true pass sets. He was also second in the country in run defense grade amongst edges at 90.2. So good at, even despite being undersized, good at setting the edge in the run game. Missed tackles, he's middle of the pack, kind of average, maybe somewhere in the middle 20%, still a little bit of average, 13.2% missed tackle rate. He was over 11th in the country in pass rush win rate by PFF, and he led all edges with 49 stops. His and then for some of the Senior Bowl speed measurements that you mentioned with the ZebraTech technology, 88th percentile in on-field speed all time for an edge rusher in the Senior Bowl. That's out of 85 edge rushers. On tape, he shows a variety of pass rush moves. He's got good bend around the edge, looks to have good closing speed. And he also shows the ability to shed blocks and make plays on the ball in the run game.
And he showed some power at the Senior Bowl, too. I mean, everyone saw
he put
the clip of him putting Connerly on his butt. Just throwing him to the ground.
Bull rush.
Exactly. And he's actually a guy who I think at the Senior Bowl might have played himself out of the Packers range. But it is what it is.
Yeah. And as he get pass rush wins with speed rush, bull rush, swim moves, shows a lot of versatility in his pass rush repertoire.
I also think coming in at 250 at the Senior Bowl was a big win for him. because you watch him, and I think he only played at like low 240s, and for him to put on that weight and then also still kick ass at the Senior Bowl, it was a pretty big deal for him.
Yeah, and so speaking of how he's moved up the board, a quote from so Daniel Jeremiah had him as one of the 12 standout players from the Senior Bowl from his viewing, and what he had to say was that Green looked like a top 20 pick here in mobile. His play speed off the edge is real, which helps explain why he led the FBS with 17 sacks in 2024. This is another guy where we'll see how his testing at the combine does, but his speed on field at the Senior Bowl looks really good, and his tape looks really good, both in the one-on-one reps at the Senior Bowl as well as the
he had some crazy explosive wins. I think his like win rate at the Senior Bowl was fine, but the wins that he did have were all like, oh my goodness, he just annihilated that tackle. That was terrible. But yeah, and especially like we already mentioned the Connerly one, he got a bunch of guys with like some real. He's just so explosive. Like he's a freak.
Right, he's a guy who looks like he's another edge rusher who could win quickly.
And he's a guy, like, despite playing at a smaller school at Marshall, absolutely zero concern about the level of play he's playing against. Like, he he completely decimated that concern at all. Like, it's not even a thought anymore after the Senior Bowl. He just kicked so much ass. It was pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, once he got a chance to go up against players from the big schools, he was
It didn't matter. It did not matter. But no, yeah, I mean he would be a lot of fun. I'm seeing mocks where he's going top 10 now. Like that's the thing. He might have. We need him to like, tank the combine, please. Just take it easy. Just don't try too hard.
Yeah, so he this is one of those players where I'm gonna like put him on my board of players I'm really interested in before it becomes a totally ridiculous idea.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yep, yeah, no more, no chance. Yeah, that's how I feel about Green. That's how I feel about another guy that you have, Igbuka, where he's projected to go 20s now, but I feel like he's gonna have a good combine. I and like just the rest of the receiver class is kind of meh. I just, man, I hope they don't. I hope they have bad combines. It's like, what was it, the Lions front office when Amon-Ra St. Brown ran like a 4.56 at the combine, were like ecstatic because they were like, oh, now we can just wait to draft him because no one's going to take him early.
Yeah, and then the Packers passed on him, and
yep, Amari Rodgers
went for Amari Rodgers instead. It's similar.
What's better?
Similar role in the offense.
What's better, Amari Rodgers over Amon-Ra, or taking Jay Sternberger over Terry McLaurin?
Oh. You picked two players who are out of the league.
Exactly. Two players who didn't last 2 seasons in the league. Rough times. That was the third round curse. That was the heart of the third round curse. It was like, you can't take anyone good right now.
Players are begging.
Please don't take us in the third round for the love of God. Anyone, anything else you want to say about Mike Green? Because I'd be ecstatic if he fell to us. Or even if we traded up for him, I wouldn't hate that either. Which, maybe we do, maybe we don't, but you never know.
Probably not if he's going 9.
No, probably not. No, I don't think we're quite breaking the bank on that. But my next player for the Packers is also a guy I think that would be able to help with the pass rush. You might be sensing a theme. He's not an edge rusher, however. This is Derek Harmon, interior defensive lineman from Oregon. This physical profile is a bit unofficial because he was not at the Senior Bowl and the combine has not happened yet. But I couldn't find an age for him, but he was a redshirt freshman in 2021, so I'm assuming he's 22 years old. He was listed by Oregon at 6'5" in the 88th percentile and 310 pounds, which would be in the 65th percentile. Again, we'll have official weights in about a week or so. In terms of his production, of 89 interior defensive linemen, once again from the consensus big board that I could find PFF data from, of those 89, he was 5th in pressure rate, 19th in sacks, 56th in pressure to sack rate, 20th in stop rate, and 22nd in run defense grade. So very high in all those. His movement, if he's like actually 310, he moves like he's like 290. It's like absurd how how quickly he bursts upfield once he's past his man. Some quotes from scouts. Daniel Jeremiah has him 22nd overall on his big board. Quote, Harmon is a quick, disruptive defensive tackle with excellent instincts. As a pass rusher, he has quick hands to knock away the punch of opposing linemen. He also has a club rip move that helps him collect early wins. He flashes an occasional bull rush, but I'd like to see more of it because it's effective. Against the run, he's very aware and avoids getting displaced by down blocks. He can anchor down versus double teams, and he excels at shooting gaps to disrupt and redirect runners. Overall, Harmon has a great feel for the game and can create a lot of havoc despite lacking an elite trait, end quote. And then Dane Brugler has him 19th overall. Quote, Harmon is a player who can win in different ways. He forces blockers to attack air because of his lateral explosiveness, but he also uses strong, crafty hands to swat away their reaches as he bursts through gaps to close on the ball carrier. He must become a more consistent finisher, but there wasn't a more disruptive interior defensive lineman in college football this season, end quote. So, you can see why I might be very high on him. The only question I have is, if the Packers were to draft an interior defensive lineman early, it's not as big of a need as edge, and I just wonder how much play you're getting out of an interior defensive lineman if you take him in the first round. Like, is he taking a lot of snaps from Kenny? Based on how Kenny played last year, that's what might not be the worst thing, but based on how much you're paying Kenny, that might not be ideal. That probably means less snaps for a guy like Carl Brooks, who I think we were all excited about his first year. Had a bit of a down second year, but I think we all are still excited about. Does Wyatt play less? Does how? My main question is just like, how does he work in the rotation if you were to take an interior defensive lineman this early?
Yeah, in some ways it'd be picking for the future, which the Packers have done a lot of. And also doesn't necessarily go with it's urgent.
Yeah,
show some urgency.
But at the same time, if he's that good, I think one takeaway from the Eagles winning the Super Bowl is like, you know what, just take good defensive linemen. Screw it, just keep taking them. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and they might, they'll be losing Slayton. Of course, it's not necessarily a first rounder for a primary run defense if you want to just replace his role 1-for-1.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they need more. The one player who seems to be reliable for rushing the passer inside right now is Wyatt.
Yeah, and even he never finished. Like, no offense, but right now he does not finish his rushes. He gets pressures, but he misses so many tackles. He is the king of being in the backfield instantly and then missing the tackle. I just always think of Tommy Cutlets. Goodness, what is his last name? The guy for the Giants.
DeVito.
Tommy DeVito. Yes, Tommy DeVito. Just somehow slipping out of his hands like three different times in that game.
Just think Danny DeVito is running away from us and can't be tackled.
It's just I would pay to watch Danny DeVito play football. That'd be really entertaining. Or for Danny DeVito to be the football. That would also be very funny.
I don't know if Danny DeVito wants to set foot on a football field.
But anyway, I would be really psyched with Harmon. I just think he's a really, really good player. My only question is just fit and need, but at the same time, if you're drafting great players, you just figure it out later.
I think if they could get some consistent pass rush production up the middle, I think it'd make a big difference.
I think any pass rush production from anywhere would make a huge difference.
Right. Whatever the most impactful pass rusher you can get, whether it's in the inside or the edge.
Yeah, exactly.
I would not hate.
Yeah, although pivoting from pass rush, it seems like you have your eyes set on a maybe different need for the Packers with your third and final first rounder.
Yeah, and I did, you're talking about the age, I did forget to mention, I think Pierce is maybe only 21 years old, so he's pretty young. Mm-hmm. And Green, I don't know, though I don't think he's that old, because it wasn't that because he started college in 2021, maybe, I think he committed. And another thing I forgot to mention about him that I discovered and looked at, he was a wrestler in high school.
The wrestlers, it's good to have the extra technique. You love to see it.
But going a completely different direction, and another need I think it's our second biggest need. I actually have this higher than corner.
I do too.
Is a wide receiver. And now whether we can get the kind of wide receiver we need, that's another question. But so I've got a first round wide receiver here, Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. He's 22 and a third years old right now, and unofficially at 6'1", 205 pounds. He's not wasn't senior bowl, hasn't had any official measurements taken yet. He seems like he could be available. 24th by Dave Brugler, 17th by PFF's board, 25th by Daniel Jeremiah, and 24th by consensus. So that, a lot of that is right on where the Packers will be picking. In 2024, he had 1,051 yards, and it broke out in his first full year in 2022 with 1,151 yards. He did have a little bit of a down year in 2023 with only 514 yards in 10 games, but bounced back in his final year. 76.4 catch rate, which I really like the high catch percentage. I think that's something that translates well, and only 5.8% drops. His receiving grade from PFF is 82.4, which is, borderline elite, and 80.9 grade against man coverage. Big grades against man coverage.
Yes, we need it. We need it badly.
We need it in a bad way.
And something that Trevor Sikkema of PFF was talking about with Ibuka, because he actually mocked him to the Packers in the latest NFL Stock Exchange, like post-Senior Bowl mock draft.
We're on the same wavelength.
He is also apparently just an absolute dog as a blocker, which we know Matt LaFleur
That's something
love.
I've been following it because I must have been watching the reps where he's getting thrown the ball.
Yep. Yeah. So, willing to do the dirty work, which we know is a prerequisite for a receiver in the Matt LaFleur offense.
Yeah. So he's also in production is 2.5 yards per route run, 59.1% contested catch rate. So both of those are above the 75th percentile from PFF. So all those things are kind of things we need, being able to contested catches,
man coverage beater.
And
the only question with him is how much is he a slot only guy, right? Like that's like the only
one of the downsides I have is he lined up 81% of the time in the slot in 2024 and 73.2% in the slot for his career. And just watching the tape, he looks like he's doing a lot of underneath work on the routes.
Yeah.
Where he's getting thrown the ball underneath. And his average depth of target is only 7.9 yards. So
yeah, not very high, especially for college, not very high.
Yeah. So you can see it. I was looking, it's like, okay, it seems like he's doing a lot underneneath. So I looked at the depth of target and said, oh, yeah, that tracks.
Yes, he is. He is doing a lot underneath. And,
it wasn't just, a little bias that I had in the few plays I saw.
Yeah. And you and I talked about this, about, slot only guys in college, because there have been some players who have been absolute steals because they got labeled as slot only guys, whether it's AJ Brown coming out of Ole Miss was considered a slot only guy. Justin Jefferson coming out of LSU was considered a slot only guy.
Here first,
yes, he's
folks.
AJ Brown or Justin Jefferson.
He's AJ Brown
yes,
and Justin Jefferson
combined.
All rolled into one.
Yes, exactly. Those guys are huge, especially AJ Brown. AJ Brown's massive.
AJ Brown's very big, but Justin Jefferson's not huge. But at 6'1", 205,
that's true. Justin Jefferson
is big enough.
Yes,
to play on the outside.
Yeah, it's not a size thing. It's just whether or not he does. But there have been a lot of players over the years who have been labeled as slot only guys, and then they get to the pros, and it's like, oh no, that's just what their offense was asking them to do. And so I don't think it's like a death knell that they mostly played in the slot in college at all. But yeah, I do think
it would have been nice if he had been at this Senior Bowl to see some one-on-one reps. Press man, but
c'est la vie.
Wasn't available.
But for Ibuka, I think there are a limited number of players who in the draft this year fit that like potential number one wide receiver. Like, because I don't really have a lot of interest in a lot of these day 2, day 3 receivers, just because it's like another receiver too. It's like we don't need a fourth wide receiver too. Like what we really need is a guy who can go out there and beat man coverage. And I don't think there are many of those in this draft. Like if Ted McMillan falls, like I think trade up for him and sprint the card in. If Ibuka falls to you, I think that would be very handy. I would not mind it at all. But outside of those two, I'm just really not that high on this receiver class so far. There's a couple guys I like later. Like I like Horton out of Colorado State a lot. But I don't think he's necessarily a one. Like I just think you're just getting more depth at receiver at that point. It's like the depth is fine. Like the depth is not the problem.
And I might be going there later in this episode.
Yeah, that's
but
fine.
there are receivers I like. They might. How much do they,
move the
everybody down the wide receiver pecking order is a valid question.
Exactly. But anyway,
so I was looking up some other things about Ibuka. Looking on a player profiler. He had a 67th percentile breakout age at 19.9 years old,
which is
quite good.
Good, yeah.
And according to what data they had on there, they had his like a high school 40 time of 4.42, so speed should not be an issue.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see him at the combine because I think he's going to really show out. But anyway, moving on to our final first rounder that we're keeping an eye on, or at least the final one that I'm keeping an eye on. And
the final one that we're going to talk about today, so this episode doesn't end up being 3 hours long.
Exactly. But that for me is Jack Sawyer, edge rusher out of Ohio State. In terms of his physical profile, he's going to be 23 years old by the start of the season. He's 6'5", which is in the 79th percentile amongst edges, and he's 260 pounds, which is in the 39th percentile amongst edges. Again, those are unofficial; those are just their listings via Ohio State. We'll have more official measurements soon. In terms of his production, of 61 edges, those same not of 61 edges, of those same 85 edges that I compared Ezerako to. He was 16th in pressure rate, 11th in sacks, 46th in pressure to sack rate, 48th in stop rate, and 15th in run defense grade. He's a guy who I think is being underrated in this, draft, in my opinion. I think he's, as an athlete, better than he's getting credit for. Some scout quotes on him. Daniel Jeremiah has him 40th on his big board. Quote, Sawyer is a big, rugged edge defender with excellent production. Against the run, he's a bully at the point of attack. He jolts blockers with his hands before discarding and pursuing the ball. He consistently collapses tight ends. He plays with excellent effort to chase plays from the backside. He will drop into coverage on occasion. He's tight in his change of direction, but his instincts put him in position to make plays. As a pass rusher, he relies mostly on power. He runs his feet on contact, generating push with his bull rush. He also has a violent club move. Overall, Sawyer is a dominant edge setter in the run game, and he will test the brakes of opposing tackles in the passing game. And then Dane Brugler had him 44th overall. Quote, an Ohio kid who grew up to be a Buckeyes captain, Sawyer increased his number of pressures created from 22 to 37 to 64 over the last 3 seasons. He will forever be remembered within the program for his strip sack 83-yard scoop and score against Texas in college football playoff title game. He is one-dimensional as a pass rusher and lacks the ideal suddenness or length for an edge player, but his activity level and the strength in his hands make him an every down factor, end quote. And I honestly feel like his suddenness and his quick twitch are being underrated in some ways. He reminds me a lot of George Karlaftis actually coming out of college, who, has had a very nice start to his career with the Chiefs so far. Not like a dominant edge rusher, but I think, a plug-and-play starter who will be impactful from day one, in my opinion.
And a player that a lot of people were kind of thinking as a possibility for the Packers when he
Karlaftis when he was coming out. And I think Sawyer's being underrated as an athlete. I'm curious to see him at the Combine because I think he's going to be better than people think he's going to be. Obviously, maybe I'll be wrong, but I think he is being underrated in this class so far. In a very good edge rusher class, to be fair, so a lot of competition there, but I would not be mad at all if the Packers went that direction, barring him testing as I expect him to test.
Yeah, this is a good year to want a pass rusher.
Yes, good year to need
one of the Packers needs. Not necessarily the best year to want a top end receiver.
True. That's what free agency I guess they're not a great free agency also to get a good receiver. But yeah, so I would not be mad at all with Sawyer at all. But Dad, we're running a little long here, so let's move on to some of our second round guys and start us off with who your top second round target is.
So I'm going to go. I'm just going to go back to back with receivers here now. Though I don't actually expect some of this. Will depend on who they pick in the first round, what direction they go. I think in the second round.
Yeah,
but I've got Jalen Royals, a wide receiver from Utah State, guy we talked about a little bit in our Senior Bowl.
He's got that really Jordan Love Utah State connection. There's got to be a mind meld there, right?
Yes, must be. He's 5'11" and 3/8, 210 pounds, 31-inch arms, a little short arms, and he's 22 years old. On the boards, he's 58th by Dane Brugler, 78th, only 78th at PFF. He's not in Daniel Jeremiah's top 50, but, the Packers picking 54th, so you wouldn't necessarily expect it, and 66th by consensus. I think he's going to keep rising up a little bit because of the Senior Bowl, and I expect he'll test well. He was productive in college, so that's one thing about Ibuka and Royals. The Packers like players who actually put up good numbers in college for a wide receiver. And he had 1,084 yards in 13 games in 2023 and only had 839 yards, but in 7 games. So he's averaging, almost 120 yards a game in 2024 before the season ended in October with a foot injury. And he still had 6 touchdowns in only 7 games and 15 touchdowns for a school record in 2023 for Utah State. Averaged over 15 yards per catch in both years, 68% and 70% catch rate the last 2 years, and a drop rate of only 5.2% last year. He played well in the Senior Bowl. So it seems he's healed from his injury already. He's going there and playing well in the one-on-ones. His PFF grades of 80.6 receiving, including 77.5 against man coverage. So doing well against man again. It's a good thing. And elite 3 yards per route run. 9th in the class out of 202 wide receivers I looked at. And an above average 53.3 contested catch rate. So a little bit above average, 82nd out of 202. So like top 40%. And he mostly lined up outside, 78% wide and 22% in the slot, according to PFF. 97th percentile target share. That's from player profile, 34.5%.
He's throwing to him. He's down there somewhere.
Right. It's like the Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed's down there somewhere. And 80th percentile college dominator rating of 38.8 and a breakout age of 20.5. Now, by my count, he won 8 of his 11 one-on-one reps at the Senior Bowl, significantly better than the 55% win rate overall. And I think he also has shown a decent amount of wiggle and tackle breaking after the catch on tape, which is nice to see. I haven't looked at his blocking, downfield blocking, but he's pretty physical and is fairly thickly built. In some ways, he looks a little bit like a running back with a ball in his hands.
I was going to say, a lot of people would say, like, oh, only 5'11", like, is that big enough for a Packers receiver? Well, Brian Gutekunst has talked about a lot of different times, like, short doesn't mean small. Like, as long as they've got some, like, heft to them, they don't mind taking guys who are a little bit shorter.
Yeah, and I didn't look to see how much they handed off the ball, but he's maybe a little bit of a kind of a Deebo Samuel sort of look to him.
Yeah, and, I mean, the regular Deebo Samuel, they did say they liked. They mentioned specifically by name that they liked him. And hey, the regular Deebo Samuel might be available, so maybe let's go get him.
Maybe we'll get Deebo. We'll have Deebo Samuel at home.
Exactly, but Deebo Samuel at home, actual Deebo, maybe as opposed to drafting Royals.
Now his on-field speed that we have so far was very poor at the Senior Bowl, bottom like 4 percentile, but his better in his max acceleration, 70th percentile. Now, reportedly, I was able to digging up what was known out there about his speed. He ran a sub 4.40 at some kind of Utah State elites camp in 2022, which is how he got an offer to go to Utah State. He traveled across country from Georgia, maybe wherever he was, to go to this camp and broad jumped it was a 10-10, and that I didn't write down, and ran like a 4.3 something 40. So, one thing I do think about the Senior Bowl speed measurements, I don't think a low measurement is really definite. I think if you see a high measurement, that's a good thing. But low, it might be that whatever plays you're running, you're not actually opening up and getting to top speed.
Yeah, it's like that's the max speed they measured you at, not the max speed that you can run. Like maybe you just never got to a point. It could be that
whatever you're running, it's short routes or in contact, and you're not actually getting to show what your top speed is.
Maybe
so. So there's reports out there that he's actually very fast, and so that would be nice as well.
Yeah, and Lord knows the Packers are going to need some speed on offense with Christian Watson missing the majority of next year, because right now, who's the guy taking the top off on the defense? Luke Musgrave? I don't even know.
Bo Melton?
Is it Reed? Is it Melton? Maybe. The thing with Melton is he's fast, but I don't think I've seen him make many downfield catches.
And that's the thing; he's not making downfield catches or contested catches, downfield. So It might be Reed, actually.
It really might be Reed, and ideally, you'd like to use Reed as more of a. Yeah, maybe. Honestly, I wouldn't hate it, but the thing with Reed is you'd prefer not to just have him running 9 routes all day and just decoy stuff, and you'd like to use him more ways than that. But if he's the only guy with speed on the offense, that's. But I wouldn't hate them using Dobbs a little bit more as a deep threat, because I think he has more downfield juice than he's been allowed to show. Especially when he was
surprised me at times with the ball in his hand, running away from players.
And when he was at Nevada, his big thing was deep threat. That was his the name of his game. And then for some reason he got to the pros and became a contested catch savant, which was not at all what his game was in Nevada. But hey, weird things happen when you change roles. My first player, though, that I'm targeting in the second round for the Packers is a corner. I already mentioned how I don't think corner's a major need, but I wouldn't hate taking one on a day 2 pick and then having them compete for a starting outside corner spot. Player, though, is Darian Porter out of Iowa State. His physical profile, this is per the Senior Bowl, so these are official. He's 24 years old, 6'2" and 3/8 inches, 197 pounds, 33 and a quarter inch arms. He had the second highest top speed of 88 Senior Bowl corners, behind only Tariq Woolen, who plays for the Seahawks now, and the fourth highest max acceleration and 23rd in max deceleration. So very, very athletic, and we're going to see that at the combine as well, I think. And also really good size. I mean, over 6'2" is massive for a corner, 33 and a quarter inch arms. I mean, those are like NFL tackle level arms. Like, that's pretty nuts. In terms of production of 92 corners this past year, he was 7th in yards per coverage snap allowed, 2nd in quarterback rating against, 35th in missed tackle rate, and allowed. So overall, the course of this past year, he allowed 5 catches on 17 targets for 70 yards in 12 games and also had 3 picks. So he almost had as many picks as catches allowed.
It's kind of, his production is kind of bonkers. Like, this guy came out of nowhere this year.
And that is the thing. So that's the question mark. Is he was like a 6th year senior? Why did it take this long for him to play is like the red flag. Is he just better because he's like 24 years old in his athletic prime going against like 19-year-olds? Like, those are the two things to like question about. In terms of what scouts have to say about him, Lance Zierlein of NFL.com, he wasn't in Daniel Jeremiah's top 50, so I wasn't able to grab a quote from Jeremiah, but Lance Zierlein has this, quote, 6th-year senior with elite traits and special teams talent, but only 1 year of starting experience at cornerback. Porter's rep total is heavy on zone coverage, but he has the athleticism, burst, and speed to handle more man coverage. He has excellent zone awareness with the twitch and ball skills to expand his sphere of influence. He uses his length to shade downfield throws, but needs to get stronger to improve his press, his contest, and his tackling and run support. More schooling is needed as a pattern matcher, but his athletic profile and instant impact on special teams should create more confidence in projecting Porter's continued ascension as a CB2, CB3. And then Dane Brugler had him 99th overall in his top 100. Porter is a towering corner with legit speed. The traits are too appealing for him to fall out of the top 100, but why did it take until his 6th season in college for him to see steady snaps? A very valid question. I don't know. But I think with that kind of athletic profile, with that kind of production, albeit, only as a 1-year starter, if he wasn't a 1-year starter, and he wasn't 24 years old, lock first round pick, you're talking about elite size, elite athleticism, and elite production. If he wasn't 24 years old, he would not be available in the second round. So it's like, okay, right. Something's got to be there.
Those drawbacks should not stop you from picking a player in the second round, where your success rate, is not necessarily that high.
Yeah,
you could get a top end starter, even if you don't want to sign him to an extension, because by which point he'll be 28.
Yeah,
but if you get 4 years of top end play from a second round pick at a position of need,
I'm very interested. He's a pretty physical player as well. Like, you watch him play and he's willing to hit guys. Good size for the position as well. I find him very fascinating, and I would not mind at all. It's not even a flyer. I feel like it's just okay, his downside is he's old. Okay, fair enough. It's not like he's 30. You still get good series of years out of him. But yeah, so some help in the secondary there to compete at outside corner. But Dad, who is your final player to watch for in the second round that you have an early eye on for the Packers?
Okay, so I'm going back to defense this time. I've been defense, offense, defense. And I'm going with a D tackle this time rather than an edge rusher. A guy that you actually clued me into at first, and that's Jamari Caldwell from Oregon.
A couple different Oregon D tackles. Maybe we could just reunite them. Harmon in the first, Caldwell in the second. Just put that D line back together.
Yeah. So I don't know what his age is. He played 3 years at Oregon, but I think went to JUCO beforehand.
Yeah, they don't get the ages until after the combine for some reason. It's odd to me, but whatever.
He's not very tall. He's only 6'2", 25th percentile. 339 pounds though. 95th percentile weight.
Massive man.
And shorter arms, only 19th percentile, 32 and a quarter. He's not in Brugler's top 100 or Daniel Jeremiah's top 50. 111th by PFF, 180th by consensus. So this is a guy I'm actually stretching the boundaries here for a second rounder, but I think he's rising. He's already moved up 90 spots on PFF's board since the Senior Bowl. And I think he's going to keep rising with more testing. By PFF grading, he had an 81.6 grade on run defense, a 71.5 grade on pass rush, and a 74.8 grade in pass rush against true pass sets. 7.5% run stop rate and a 9.3% pass rush win rate. And both and a decent 25 pressures despite only converting one to a sack. So that maybe sounds a little familiar. Although he had 6 sacks in 2023 on fewer pressures. So he's shown the ability to convert some pressures to sacks in the past. And for all of those numbers I just ran through, he's in the top 25% for interior defensive linemen last year. At the Senior Bowl, this is really what's, I think, driving his rise.
He was one of my favorite guys from the Senior Bowl this year in the O-line D-line 1v1s.
So maybe not speed, but if we're trying to measure explosion, which we like in pass rushers as well as offensive linemen, the max acceleration is probably the best measurement from what we can get from the Senior Bowl. He had the best ever max acceleration for an interior defensive lineman in Senior Bowl history. Number one. And so by far,
I was to say, not even weight adjusted.
Yeah. Right. So
not even weight adjusted. He's number one.
Way ahead of everybody.
340
And then you
pounds.
do weight adjusted. He's like blowing everybody out of the water in his max acceleration out of 80 interior defensive linemen since 2018. He's also in the top 25% in weight adjusted on-field top speed at the Senior Bowl all time. And he played well in the one-on-one drills. He overall did well in the one-on-one drills. By your count, Tommy, he won 6 out of his 7 reps. And the defenders were only winning 42% of these reps overall.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Yeah, he was. They were not able to block him. It was actually kind of very impressive to watch.
And I was looking at his tape a little bit, and it looks like he has the ability to collapse the front of the pocket. So just even if he's and sometimes jump past the blocker as well and split the gap and get into the backfield. He also has shown the ability to anchor against double teams in the run game and hold up at the point of attack with 2 blockers trying to push him downfield. So I think he's able to provide probably everything maybe that Slayton is giving, and then more the ability to get into the backfield and affect the passing game. I think he could, see whether he rises up to, second round territory, but he could be a fun player to add to the defensive line and possibly the heir apparent to Kenny in the future.
He feels like a supercharged TJ Slayton to me. Just like extra double, like even more explosive TJ Slayton. And Slayton's explosive, but he
just has never developed pass rush moves or something. It's always surprised me that he was not able to do more in the pass rush, considering that even when he was 360 pounds, he could still dunk a basketball.
Exactly, which is nuts. But anyway, I'm really high on him as well. A couple Oregon D tackles on this list, wouldn't hate it at all. My final player, though, and the final player for all of us in terms of, early draft crushes, is Ariante Ursary, who's a offensive tackle out of Minnesota. Massive human being. No official age. The measurements are from the Senior Bowl. I think he's around 23 years old based on him entering college in 2020, but we're going to know more about that soon. 6'5" 3/4 inches, which is 45th percentile. 339 pounds, which is 94th percentile, with 34-inch arms, which is 46th percentile, but well past the 33-inch threshold that you have to play tackle pretty much. Like, that's generally considered to be, you need to have at least 33-inch arms to play tackle in the NFL. 81st percentile in both max acceleration and max deceleration at the Senior Bowl, despite his size. Only 29th percentile in top speed, but you're a tackle. I don't need you to be running a 40 out here, really. In terms of his production, amongst 65 tackles that I was able to find numbers for in this, consensus big board, 25th in pressure rate allowed, 21st in run blocking grade, only 1 sack allowed this season, and just 3 penalties in 12 games. Just a massive humanity and a really good mover for being a massive humanity. Some scout quotes. Lance Zierlein, quote, 3-year starter at left tackle with good power. Ursary is not a natural bender, which creates disadvantages with leverage and when attempting to mirror moving fronts. He's well versed in Minnesota's outside zone attack, but might be more consistent in power inside zone and hat-on-hat matchups. He's huge, but he sets with good quickness to the rush, using his length and hand strength to gather it or lock it out. His anchor is derived from his upper half, which opens him to hand counters. Ursary has the potential to become an average starting tackle on the right side, but his success will be tied to matchups from across from him, end quote. And then Dane Brugler had him actually 50th overall in his top, just in his top 100. 50th, pretty good. Quote, with his NFL-ready build and length, Ersaria has a stiff punch to steer rushers wide of the pocket, and he can anchor down when rushers try to attack him up the middle. Ersaria moves well for a big man, especially as a zone blocker, but there are some sloppy elements to his game. He must improve his timing and consistency during his NFL transition, end quote. And, looking at him at the Senior Bowl, I was able to watch 6 reps. He only won 3, but every rep he took at left tackle, he won. The ones he lost were 2 at right tackle and 1 at left guard, which are positions he never played at college. For reference, he played 2,351 snaps in college. 10 of those were not at left tackle. So he's only played at left tackle in college, which might indicate, a lack of flexibility. But at the same time, they were having him play at different spots, at the Senior Bowl. So clearly there's at least a thought that perhaps he has that flexibility. But I think he would be just an interesting piece as, this athletic marvel for his size, compete with Walker at left tackle, maybe provide some interior flexibility. And I just think that the Packers really need to, beef up some of their depth along the offensive line. And I think, just give Walker a bit more competition as well.
Yeah, I think you're really thinking about adding. They're definitely going to add offensive linemen.
Maybe 2 or 3, honestly.
Yeah, I've been generally picking 2 per mock draft lately. One sometimes both tackles, or sometimes center and a tackle, or sometimes and of course tackles who will move inside eventually. I've been picking some of those as well.
Also, yes. Which I think Ersu could maybe do, even though he, hasn't done it much. The people at the Senior Bowl were trying him at guard at least for a few snaps. So
they probably just wanted to. Maybe some coaches said we'd like to see him try it, see what he could do.
Yeah, exactly. And like you mentioned, I think even if they bring back Myers, I think they should draft linemen, and especially if they don't bring back Myers, they need to draft linemen. But anyway, any final closing statements, Dad, or should we wrap things up here?
Oh, I just would want to mention maybe a couple of honorable mentions.
Okay, run through them, and then we'll wrap it up.
Didn't have time, but a couple other players I started taking notes on. Offensive tackle for NC State, Anthony Belton.
He's a guy I like at the Senior Bowl. Yeah, he had a great Senior Bowl.
D tackle for Toledo, Darius Alexander.
Also a great Senior Bowl.
Another good Super Bowl. Trey Amos, a corner from Ole Miss. Kenneth Grant, D tackle from Michigan. The guys I considered for this list, but didn't end up including. But other players I like. Go in my honorable mentions.
Yeah, and don't worry, we will have plenty of time before the draft to talk all about more prospects that we like for the Packers. As the Combine gears up, we'll be talking a little bit about next week, what maybe some things to watch for the Combine for different positions are. Talking about players to watch for the Combine as it comes up as well. We'll probably be doing, our first mock draft coming up, and we're going to be starting mock draft Mondays. So once again, check out on Blue Sky at Father Son Packer for those mock draft Mondays coming up. Dad, how many mock drafts have you done so far, would you say?
It's not crazy.
Okay, you're not up like 60 yet?
No. I think I'm more like 30.
Okay. Well, pick up the pace. Come on now.
Yeah, so like mock draft Mondays, mock draft Tuesdays, mock draft Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Why are we limited by alliteration? Why do we need to stick to Mondays? But anyway, like we said, check that out on at Father Son Packer at Blue Sky. Please subscribe if you like what you heard, whether that's, YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Tell a friend, leave a comment, leave a review. Thank you again so much for listening. We'll be doing, an episode every single week for the entire off season. So even though, the NFL season isn't going, we're still going to be here. But, like next week, we'll probably still be talking about a little bit about the draft, coming up, free agency in a few weeks now, 3 weeks now, I believe it is. So keep your eye tuned here for everything Packers off season related. And until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.